Hello, and welcome to the show. Today, we're talking about Civil War, a movie I saw this past weekend. The film runs for 109 minutes and was released on April 12th, 2024, in a wide release format. The movie was made on a $50 million budget and so far has returned just over $25 million at the time of this recording. The most eye-catching aspect of Civil War is the pedigree behind this movie. Kirsten Dunst, who you might know as Mary Jane from Spider-Man, Wagner Moura, Kylie Spiney, Nick Offerman, who you might know as Ron from Parks and Rec, and Stephen McKinley Henderson are the top-billed cast here, while Alex Garland directs. If you don't know Alex Garland, you've probably seen or heard about his work. Garland wrote 28 Days Later, Sunshine, Dread, and was the executive producer on 28 Weeks Later. He sat in the director's chair for Ex Machina, Annihilation, which you have to see if you haven't already, and 2022's Men. Notably, Garland stated that this will likely be his last directed feature, as he plans on solely going back to screenwriting after this movie released. Let's set the scene for Civil War. No, this isn't a movie about the historic event between the North and South from the 1800s. It's a modern reimagination of what that might look like today. The film follows a raging conflict between the United States government and the allied Texas, California Western forces. Our main characters, Lee and Joel, are war journalists who plan to make the harrowing trek to Washington, D.C., recording and fully capturing the Western forces' invasion of the nation's capital. One evening, their colleague Sammy and an aspiring journalist named Jesse join their mission before they all set out on a road trip. So, is the movie worth your time? Let's get into it. Civil War is built on two ends of extremes: subtlety and brutality. To the film's credit, the sound design and harsh cuts from silence to bombastic gunfire works in its favor. Our main protagonist Lee is a world-weary person who has become nearly desensitized to the graphic nature of human destruction throughout her career, and the film truly does its best to mirror this attitude in its presentation. That in itself is both a compliment and a huge drawback to this film. Civil War does its best to stay completely neutral, without any direct references to the United States' divided political parties. This was likely an intentional choice, and I do applaud Alex Garland for not stoking the flames of an already raging fire in today's political landscape. That said, the movie suffers under the weight of being vague. While it's a refreshing change of pace to not have a message about morality on clear display, this movie, in many ways, does a poor job of framing its high concept. The most glaring example of this is the fact that there is zero explanation to how the Civil War actually started. In fact, the movie feels almost faceless in its presentation. There's little to the motivation behind the cornerstone of the story, and that can occasionally make it feel awkward. While the show don't tell approach can be effective in some circumstances, Civil War feels less like something you can invest in and more of a series of events playing out without meaning. Oftentimes, I found Civil War to be a frustrating dance of build-up without any payoff. Lee is an impromptu mentor to Jesse, despite her will to work without a connection, and the characters get a small sense of development as they work their way through each location. That isn't to say the film is without its merits. The movie has suspenseful moments and powerful sound design. It presents overt violence without emotion, which is a good mirror to the war journalism and the main character's general outlook on it all. In retrospect, this film did make me think about the way I consume violence in media, and if I've grown less mindful about the cost of human life, on screen and from what I see online. Each of the main actors turns in a good performance with enough subtle growth, but that's not enough for me to recommend it. The sequences in this movie are all nearly played out like nothing more than pit stops and "and then this happened" feel to it. I understand what the movie is going for, but the execution just isn't there. Civil War falls victim to long, lingering shots on anguished or despondent characters and traps itself in some melodramatic montages that pad out any emotion the audience may feel. My biggest problem with Civil War was the final act of this movie. A major character goes through a seemingly unearned pattern of behavior that is completely inconsistent with the film's tone and its own character, while the giant battle set piece plays out like an event that is less impactful than it's meant to be. Chief among these issues is the character's response to the movie's climax and the abrupt ending. It wraps up far too quickly and leaves you scratching your head as to why the characters reacted in the way they did. This massive event happens, and before the audience can process it, the movie is done. I walked out of Civil War less than impressed. I don't necessarily feel like the film wanted me to be, but it also didn't give me anything to be invested in. My friend felt the same way, and we discussed the nothing feel to it. Civil War doesn't really challenge its audience to feel a certain way, and I generally love it when I see a movie that leaves things ambiguous. Many will love the neutrality of the film and the way it displays horrendous subject matter without bias. There's no arrogance in Garland's directing, but there's also little substance. To an avid filmgoer like myself, I think this movie will be a bit polarizing. But to the person who only sees a few movies a year, I say it probably won't be worth your time. I think the point of Civil War was to let the audience answer the question without the movie doing it for you. And while Civil War has every right to do that, I also have the right to answer. It's hard to care. I'm giving Civil War 2 stars.